The gunshot that cracked through the dusty air of Prosperity, Nevada, in 1874 was not meant to kill, only to frighten. Meadow Gardner had been running her father's newspaper for just 3 weeks when the bullet splintered the wooden beam above her head. Sawdust rained down on her auburn hair as she stood in the doorway of the Prosperity Herald, refusing to back away from the 4 men who blocked her path to the main street. "That was just a warning, Miss Gardner," drawled Samuel Blackwell, the wealthiest cattle rancher in the territory. His silver-streaked beard caught the late afternoon sun as he tucked his revolver back into his holster. "Next time, I won't aim so high." Meadow's hands trembled, but her voice remained steady. "Is this how you solve all your problems, Mr. Blackwell, with threats and intimidation?" "Only when someone prints lies about me in my business dealings." Blackwell stepped closer, towering over her 5'5" frame. Behind him, his 3 hired men, rough-looking cowboys with dusty hats and cold eyes spread out in a semicircle. "Your father knew better than to cross me." "My father is dead," Meadow replied, feeling the familiar ache in her chest at the mention of John Gardner, found face down in Silvertooth Creek just 1 month ago. "And what I printed was not lies, but facts about how you've been damming up water rights from smaller ranchers." Blackwell's weathered face darkened. "You'll print a retraction in tomorrow's edition." "I will not." The rancher's eyes narrowed. "Then maybe you need to be reminded of your place in this town," he gestured to his men. "Teach her some respect, make her kneel and apologize." The tallest of the 3 men, a brute with a jagged scar across his cheek, stepped forward and grabbed Meadow's arm. "Down on your knees, lady. Take your hands off me," Meadow hissed, struggling against his iron grip. She said, "Let her go." The new voice cut through the tension like a knife. All heads turned toward the street, where a tall figure stood silhouetted against the setting sun. Meadow squinted against the light to make out the stranger. He moved forward with the easy grace of a mountain lion, spurs jingling softly with each step. His dark blue shirt was dusty from the trail, and the Stetson pulled low over his eyes couldn't hide the intensity of his gaze. A well-worn holster hung at his hip, housing a Colt .45 that looked as comfortable in its place as a natural extension of the man himself. "This doesn't concern you, stranger," Blackwell said, hand hovering near his own weapon. "Keep riding." The newcomer stepped onto the boardwalk, and Meadow could finally see his face, clearly, strong jaw dusted with stubble, eyes the color of a storm-tossed sea, and a mouth set in a determined line. He couldn't be more than 30 years old, but his eyes held the weight of a man who had seen much more of life than his years suggested. "I said, let her go." His voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable edge of danger. The man holding Meadow hesitated, looking to Blackwell for direction. The rancher gave a slight nod and the grip on her arm loosened. "Who might you be?" Blackwell asked, sizing up the stranger, Owen Ironwood. He moved to stand beside Meadow. "Just arrived in town." "Well, Mr. Ironwood, you've picked a poor time to play hero. This woman has been spreading falsehoods about me in her newspaper, and she needs to learn a lesson." "Forcing a woman to her knees in the middle of the street doesn't seem like much of a lesson," Owen replied. "Seems more like bullying to me." Blackwell's face reddened. "My men will make her kneel and apologize, or she bows to no man," Owen interrupted, his hand now resting casually on his holster. "Especially not one who relies on numbers to feel brave." The tension in the air thickened. Meadow could hear her heart pounding in her ears as she glanced between Owen and the 4 men facing them. This stranger had no reason to defend her, yet here he stood, seemingly unafraid of the odds stacked against him. 4 against 1, Blackwell sneered. "Not good odds for you, Ironwood." Owen's mouth quirked up at one corner. "I've faced worse." Meadow couldn't just stand by. "This is my fight, Mr. Ironwood. I don't need— Everyone needs a friend sometimes, Miss Gardner, Meadow Gardner, Miss Gardner." He nodded without taking his eyes off the men. "I'd be obliged if you'd step inside your office now." "I will not hide while you're not hiding. Strategic positioning." His voice lowered. "Please." Something in his tone made her comply, though she only retreated a few steps into the doorway of the Herald office. Blackwell laughed. "You've got spirit, Ironwood, I'll give you that, but you're new in town. You don't know how things work here." I know right from wrong, Owen replied, and 4 men threatening a woman isn't right where I come from. Where exactly is that? Blackwell asked, all over, nowhere in particular. Owen shifted his weight, and Meadow noticed how the movement put him in a better position to draw if needed. Last few years, I rode with the Texas Rangers. That revelation caused a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Blackwell's men exchanged glances. Rangers don't typically wander this far west, Blackwell said, suspicion evident in his tone. I'm not with them anymore, just passing through. Owen's gaze flicked briefly to Meadow, though I might stay a while now. Blackwell assessed the situation, clearly weighing his options. After a tense moment, he adjusted his hat and took a step back. This isn't over, Miss Gardner. You'll print that retraction, or you'll regret it. He jerked his head at his men. Let's go. As they mounted their horses and rode away, Meadow released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The street returned to its normal afternoon activity, though several townspeople who had been watching from doorways and windows continued to stare. Owen turned to her, his expression softening. Are you all right, Miss Gardner? Yes, thanks to you. She extended her hand. Though I must say that was either very brave or very foolish, Mr. Ironwood. He took her hand briefly, his calloused palm warm against hers. Most brave things look foolish until they work out. And if they hadn't worked out, a ghost of a smile crossed his face. Then I suppose we'd have found ourselves in a much more exciting situation. He glanced at the Herald office behind her. You run the newspaper, my father did. I've taken over since his passing. She straightened her shoulders. And everything I printed about Samuel Blackwell was true, documented fact. I believe you. Owen looked down the street where Blackwell and his men had disappeared. But men like that don't take kindly to having their secrets exposed. Truth shouldn't be a secret, Meadow replied. No, it shouldn't. He studied her with interest. But truth can get people killed in these parts. A chill ran down Meadow's spine. Her father's death had been ruled an accident, a fall into the creek after too much whiskey, but she had never believed it. John Gardner rarely drank and knew every inch of the land around Prosperity. Are you hungry, Mr. Ironwood? She asked suddenly. The least I can do is offer you a meal for your help today. He seemed surprised by the invitation, but nodded. I could eat, been riding since dawn. There's a decent restaurant at the Prosperity Hotel. I'll just lock up here and we can walk over. She hesitated. Unless you've already secured lodging elsewhere. Haven't had time to look for a room yet. Then the hotel it is. Meadow quickly returned to her office, gathering her things and locking the door. When she rejoined Owen on the boardwalk, she found him watching the street with vigilant eyes. Do you expect them to return? She asked as they began walking. Men like Blackwell rarely give up so easily, Owen replied, but they typically regroup before making another move. The Prosperity Hotel stood 3 stories tall at the center of town, its white painted facade and green shutters a stark contrast to the weathered buildings surrounding it. As they entered the lobby, several people turned to look, curiosity evident on their faces. News travels fast in small towns, Meadow murmured. I've noticed. Owen removed his hat as they entered the restaurant, revealing thick brown hair that curled slightly at the ends. They were seated at a corner table by a young waitress who couldn't seem to stop stealing glances at Owen. Meadow found herself unexpectedly irritated by this attention, though she had no claim on this stranger who had appeared in her life less than an hour ago. After they ordered beef stew for him, chicken and dumplings for her, Owen leaned back in his chair. So, Miss Gardner, tell me about this trouble with Blackwell. Meadow hesitated, weighing how much to share with a man she'd just met. But something about Owen Ironwood inspired trust, and she desperately needed an ally. Samuel Blackwell owns the largest cattle ranch in the territory, she began. He's been systematically cutting off water access to smaller ranches by damming creeks and buying up water rights. Last month, I discovered documents showing he's been bribing county officials to look the other way. And you printed this, with evidence. I have copies of receipts, witness statements. She lowered her voice. 3 small ranchers have been forced to sell to him in the past year alone because their cattle couldn't access water. Owen nodded slowly. That would certainly earn his ire. There's more. Meadow glanced around to ensure no one was listening. My father was investigating Blackwell's dealings before he died. He kept a journal, but it went missing from our home the night he was found in the creek. Understanding dawned in Owen's eyes. You don't believe his death was an accident? I know it wasn't, her voice caught. My father didn't drink to excess, and he knew that creek like the back of his hand. Someone wanted him silent. Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. When the waitress left, Owen spoke again, his voice low. Have you taken these concerns to the sheriff? Meadow let out a bitter laugh. Sheriff Pullman, he's firmly in Blackwell's pocket. I tried talking to him the day after my father died, but he dismissed me as a hysterical female unable to accept a tragic accident. Owen's jaw tightened at that, but he simply nodded and began eating his stew. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. What are your plans now to continue what my father started, to expose the truth? She met his gaze steadily. I won't be intimidated into silence. Admirable, he said, but dangerous. All worthwhile things involve some risk, Mr. Ironwood. Owen, he corrected. If we're going to be friends, you might as well use my given name. Friends, she raised an eyebrow. You make those quickly. He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face and made her heart skip unexpectedly. Only when they're worth making, Meadow. The way he said her name sent a small shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. She cleared her throat. Well, Owen, what brings you to Prosperity? You mentioned you were just passing through. A shadow passed over his expression. I've been tracking someone, a man named Victor Shaw. The name isn't familiar. He wouldn't be known by that name here. He changes identities like most men change shirts. Owen's knuckles whitened around his fork, but I'll know him when I see him. What did this man do? Owen hesitated, and for a moment Meadow thought he wouldn't answer. He killed my partner back when I was with the Rangers. I'm sorry, she said softly. It was 3 years ago. His voice was flat, but his eyes revealed the depth of the wound. I've been following his trail ever since. That's a long time to pursue justice. It's not just justice I'm after. Owen's gaze met hers. It's preventing him from hurting anyone else. Shaw is dangerous, charming, smart, and utterly without conscience. Meadow felt a chill at his description. And you think he's in Prosperity? I followed rumors of a man matching his description heading this way. Working as an investor or businessman of some kind, something clicked in Meadow's mind. There's a new investor in town who arrived about 2 months ago, Victor Brighton. He's been buying up commercial properties on Main Street. Owen's expression sharpened. What does he look like? Tall, well-dressed, dark hair going gray at the temples, very polished manners, she thought for a moment. He wears an unusual ring on his right hand, gold with a black stone. That's him. Owen's voice was tight. Shaw always did have a taste for fine things. He's partnered with Blackwell on several ventures, Meadow added. They're planning to bring the railroad spur to Prosperity, which would certainly benefit Blackwell's cattle business. Owen absorbed this information, his expression calculating. This complicates things. How so? If Shaw, or Brighton, as he's calling himself now, has aligned with the most powerful man in the area, he's well protected. Their meal finished, Owen paid the bill despite Meadow's protests. As they rose to leave, he turned to her with unexpected seriousness. Meadow, I think our problems may be connected. If Brighton is working with Blackwell and your father was investigating Blackwell, then my father might have uncovered something about Brighton's true identity, she finished, the implications sending a chill through her. Owen nodded grimly. Which makes your situation even more dangerous than you realized. As they stepped out into the growing darkness of evening, Prosperity's Main Street had quieted, most businesses closing for the night. The hotel clerk confirmed they had a room available for Owen, and he arranged to stay. I'll walk you home, Owen said as they exited the hotel. That's not necessary. I live above the newspaper office. It's perfectly safe. After what happened today, I'd feel better seeing you safely inside. His tone left no room for argument. As they walked the short distance back to the Herald office, Meadow was acutely aware of Owen's presence beside her, solid and reassuring. The street was mostly empty now, with only the saloon at the far end showing signs of lively activity. At the door to her office, she turned to thank him, but the words died on her lips when she saw the expression on his face. He was looking past her at the door. "What's wrong?" she asked. "The lock's been forced." He drew his revolver. "Stay behind me." Heart racing, Meadow followed him into the office. A lantern still burned low on her desk, one she was certain she had extinguished before leaving. Papers were strewn across the floor, drawers pulled open, and her filing cabinet had been ransacked. "They were looking for something specific," Owen observed, carefully checking the back room and the staircase leading to her living quarters upstairs. "The evidence against Blackwell," Meadow said, quickly moving to a loose floorboard beneath her desk. She knelt and pried it up, relief washing over her when she found the hidden compartment undisturbed. "It's still here. They didn't find it." Owen holstered his weapon. "They might come back. You shouldn't stay here tonight." "I'm not abandoning my home because of threats and intimidation," she said firmly, replacing the floorboard. "I'm not suggesting you abandon anything." His voice softened. "But sometimes a strategic retreat is the wisest course, just for tonight." Meadow considered his words, looking around at the violated space that had been both her workplace and home since her father's death. The thought of staying there alone suddenly seemed less appealing. "Where would I go?" she asked finally. "I don't have family here, and I'm not sure who I can trust." Owen hesitated only briefly. "There's a respectable boarding house run by a widow near the edge of town, Mrs. Crawford's place. I passed it on my way in. Martha Crawford, I know her. She was a friend of my mother's." Meadow nodded slowly. "She would take me in for a night, I'm sure." "Good. Pack what you need, and I'll escort you there." As Meadow gathered a few essentials from her upstairs rooms, she found herself wondering at the strange turn her life had taken in just one afternoon. A week ago, she had been focused solely on continuing her father's legacy and seeking the truth about his death. Now she found herself allied with a former Texas Ranger on a vengeance mission of his own. When she descended the stairs with a small carpet bag, Owen was examining the break-in more closely. "Professional job," he muttered. "Clean work on the lock. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Blackwell's men, possible, or Brighton's." Owen offered his arm. "Ready." The gesture was old-fashioned and courtly, unexpected from the rugged man before her. Meadow took his arm, feeling the solid strength beneath his shirt sleeve. They walked in companionable silence through the quiet streets. The moon had risen, casting long shadows and bathing the town in silver light. In another circumstance, it might have been romantic. "Thank you," Meadow said suddenly. "For intervening today, for helping me now." Owen glanced down at her. "Any decent man would have done the same." "We both know that's not true. Most men in this town would have walked on by, not wanting to cross Blackwell." He didn't deny it. "Perhaps our paths crossing today was fortunate timing for us both." Martha Crawford's boarding house was a large, well-maintained two-story home on Aspen Street, set back from the road with a neat garden in front. Lights still burned in the downstairs windows despite the late hour. The older woman who answered their knock seemed surprised to see Meadow but quickly ushered them inside when she explained the situation. "Of course you can stay, dear," Martha said, her gray hair neatly pinned up despite the hour. "I always keep a room ready for emergencies." She cast an appraising eye over Owen. "And your friend, Mr. Ironwood, has a room at the hotel," Meadow explained quickly, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks at the implication. "He was kind enough to escort me here." Martha nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Well, Mr. Ironwood, you're welcome to call on Miss Gardner here tomorrow. I run a respectable house, but I don't forbid gentlemen callers during daylight hours." "Much obliged, madam." Owen tipped his hat. "I'll check on the Herald office in the morning and let you know if it's safe to return, Meadow." As he turned to leave, Meadow impulsively caught his arm. "Be careful, Owen. These men are dangerous." His expression softened momentarily. "So am I when necessary." With a nod to both women, he departed into the night. Martha showed Meadow to a comfortable bedroom on the second floor, providing a nightgown and toiletries with practiced efficiency. "He's quite handsome," the older woman observed with a knowing smile as she turned down the bed. Those eyes of his could charm a rattlesnake. Meadow busied herself with unpacking her small bag. He's just being helpful, hum. I've been around long enough to recognize when a man looks at a woman with more than helpfulness in mind. Martha patted her shoulder. Get some rest, dear. Things always look clearer in the morning light. Left alone, Meadow changed into the borrowed nightgown and sat at the small vanity, brushing out her auburn hair. Her reflection showed a woman she barely recognized, eyes bright with something more than fear or determination. Cheeks flushed with color despite the day's troubles. She told herself it was merely the excitement of the day, the danger and drama. It had nothing to do with storm-gray eyes or the way Owen Ironwood had stood beside her against 4 armed men, saying with quiet certainty, "She bows to no man." Nothing at all. Dawn broke with golden light streaming through the lace curtains of Martha Crawford's guest room. Meadow had slept fitfully, dreams filled with gunshots and shadowy figures. She dressed quickly in the same clothes from yesterday, grateful that Martha had brushed and pressed them overnight. Downstairs, she found breakfast laid out in the dining room where 3 other boarders, 2 elderly sisters, and a young schoolteacher were already eating. Martha waved her to a seat, bringing coffee and fresh biscuits. "You had a visitor earlier," Martha said quietly, leaning close. "That handsome Mr. Ironwood checked your newspaper office at first light, said it's secure now. He fixed the lock. He'll return at 9 o'clock to escort you back if that suits." Meadow glanced at the mantel clock, just after 8. "Yes, that would be fine, thank you, Martha." "He seems very concerned for your welfare," the older woman observed, a twinkle in her eye. "We have mutual interests," Meadow replied, hoping her tone would discourage further speculation. Martha simply smiled knowingly and returned to her kitchen. True to his word, Owen arrived at 9 precisely. Meadow was waiting on the front porch, having thanked Martha profusely for her hospitality. "Any more trouble at the office?" she asked as they walked. Owen shook his head. Everything was quiet. "I installed a better lock and reinforced the back door. You didn't have to do that. Consider it payment for dinner last night," he said with a slight smile. "I also asked around town this morning. Your Mr. Brighton has offices above the bank. Seems he's been quite busy acquiring properties and making himself indispensable to the town council." "He's not my Mr. Brighton," Meadow corrected. "But yes, he's ingratiated himself quickly. He's funding the new schoolhouse, which has made him popular with families." Classic Shaw strategy. "He always establishes himself as a pillar of the community while working his schemes from the shadows." As they approached the Herald office, Meadow noticed with relief that everything appeared normal from the outside. Inside, she found the scattered papers had been neatly stacked, the drawers closed, and the filing cabinet restored to order. "Did you do all this?" she asked, surprised. Owen looked almost embarrassed. "Thought it might help you get back to work more quickly." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her. "Thank you, most men wouldn't bother. I'm not most men." His eyes met hers briefly before he turned to examine the new lock he'd installed. "This should hold against most intruders, but it wouldn't hurt to get a dog. Good alarm system." "I've been thinking about that," she admitted. "The printing press makes enough noise that I wouldn't hear someone entering while I'm working." A comfortable silence fell between them as Meadow began sorting through the mail that had accumulated in the drop box. Owen moved around the office, examining the windows and checking the back entrance again. "What's your plan now?" she asked finally. "Regarding Brighton, or Shaw, rather." Owen leaned against the edge of her desk, arms crossed. "I need to confirm it's him first, see him up close. Then gather evidence of his crimes here before making a move. I could help with that. As a newspaper editor, I have legitimate reason to interview prominent businessmen." "Absolutely not." His voice hardened. "Shaw is dangerous, Meadow. If he suspects you know something about his past, he wouldn't hesitate to eliminate the threat." "I'm already in danger from Blackwell," she pointed out, "and I need to continue investigating my father's death. If Brighton was involved, our interests align." Owen ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "You're determined to put yourself in harm's way, aren't you? I'm determined to find the truth, just as you are." She met his gaze steadily. "We could help each other." He studied her for a long moment, and she could almost see the internal debate playing across his features. Limited involvement, he said finally. You don't approach Shaw directly. We share information, but you follow my lead on anything involving him. Agreed, agreed. She extended her hand and they shook on it, his grip firm and warm. First step is surveillance, Owen said, shifting into what Meadow imagined was his ranger persona, focused and strategic. I need to watch Brighton's movements, see who he meets with. He usually lunches at the hotel restaurant around noon, Meadow offered, often with members of the town council or Blackwell. Good information. Owen nodded approvingly. What's your schedule today? I need to finish tomorrow's edition. The press runs tonight. She hesitated. Including the continued story about water rights. No retraction, none. Her chin lifted defiantly. I won't be bullied into suppressing the truth. A slow smile spread across Owen's face. You know, Meadow Gardner, you might be the bravest person I've met in a long while. The compliment warmed her unexpectedly, or the most foolhardy. Sometimes they're the same thing. He checked his pocket watch. It's nearly 10 now. I'll position myself near the hotel before noon to observe Brighton. Can we meet later to compare notes? I should be finished with the layout by 4 o'clock. We could meet at Maggie's Cafe for an early supper. It's quieter than the hotel. Perfect. Owen headed for the door, then paused. Be careful today. Keep your door locked even during business hours. After he left, Meadow settled at her desk, trying to focus on the newspaper layout before her. But her thoughts kept drifting to Owen Ironwood, his quiet confidence, his unexpected kindness, the intensity in his eyes when he spoke of justice. She had known the man barely 24 hours, yet already he had become entangled in her life in ways she couldn't have anticipated. And despite the danger surrounding them both, she couldn't deny the small thrill that ran through her at the thought of seeing him again that evening. The afternoon dragged by as Meadow finalized the next day's edition. She had just sent young Tommy Miller, her part-time assistant, to deliver the completed layouts to the printer when the bell above the door jingled. Looking up, she expected to see Owen returning early. Instead, Samuel Blackwell stood in the doorway, alone this time but no less intimidating. Mr. Blackwell, she said, instinctively reaching for the small derringer her father had kept in the desk drawer. What can I do for you? Blackwell removed his hat, a gesture of politeness that seemed at odds with his threatening behavior the previous day. Miss Gardner, I've come to apologize for yesterday's unpleasantness. Meadow's hand stilled on the drawer. Apologize, my men were overzealous. He stepped further into the office, his massive frame seeming to shrink the space. I never intended for them to manhandle you. That's no way to treat a lady. Suspicious of this sudden change in attitude, Meadow remained standing behind her desk. Yet you did intend to intimidate me into retracting my story. Business is business, he said, waving a hand dismissively, but I've had time to reconsider. Perhaps there's a way we can come to an understanding that benefits us both. I'm not interested in being bought, Mr. Blackwell. A tight smile crossed his face. Everyone has their price, Miss Gardner. For some, it's money. For others, he glanced around the modest office. Perhaps it's security, the certainty of keeping this newspaper running for years to come. The Herald is doing just fine. For now, he agreed. But printing is an expensive business. Equipment breaks down. Paper supplies can become difficult to obtain. The threat was thinly veiled, and Meadow felt her temper rising. Are you suggesting you would interfere with my business? Blackwell spread his hands innocently. I'm merely pointing out the economic realities of running a small-town newspaper. Now, I happen to have connections with suppliers in San Francisco who offer very reasonable rates for paper and ink. As a major advertiser, I could ensure your costs remain manageable. In exchange for editorial discretion, his eyes hardened. My business affairs remain private. In return, the Herald thrives. Meadow came around the desk, anger overcoming caution. My father built this newspaper on principles of truth and integrity, Mr. Blackwell. He wouldn't compromise those values for economic security, and neither will I. Your father is dead, Blackwell said bluntly, and you're a young woman alone in a harsh world. Be practical. I prefer to be principled. Blackwell's facade of politeness slipped. Principles won't save you when the door opened again, cutting him off mid-sentence. Owen entered, his gaze immediately taking in the situation. Am I interrupting? Relief washed through Meadow at his appearance. Not at all. Mr. Blackwell was just leaving. Blackwell turned, reassessing the newcomer in daylight. Mr. Ironwood, isn't it? I understand you're new to prosperity. Just arrived, Owen confirmed, moving to stand beside Meadow, finding it an interesting place so far. Indeed, small towns often have unexpected complexities. Blackwell replaced his hat. Miss Gardner, consider my offer. It won't remain open indefinitely. After he left, Meadow released a shaky breath. That man has impeccable timing for appearing when I'm alone. What did he want? Owen asked, his expression concerned. She explained Blackwell's visit and his thinly veiled offer of protection in exchange for editorial control. He's trying a different approach since intimidation didn't work. Smart, Owen acknowledged. When threats fail, try bribery. When that fails, he didn't need to finish the thought. Did you see Brighton? Meadow asked, changing the subject. Owen nodded. From a distance, it's Shaw, no question. Same mannerisms, same preference for fine tailoring. He had lunch with 2 town councilmen and later met briefly with Blackwell. They're planning something big with this railroad spur, Meadow said. My sources tell me they're buying land along the proposed route at prices well below market value, sometimes using questionable tactics to pressure owners to sell. Classic land speculation scheme. Owen looked thoughtful. But Shaw usually has a more nefarious angle than simple profit. In Texas, he used legitimate business as cover for running stolen cattle across the border. There have been rumors of increased cattle rustling on the smaller spreads, Meadow noted. Nothing proven, though. They spent the next hour comparing information about Blackwell and Brighton's activities. Meadow showed Owen the evidence she'd gathered about water rights manipulation, while he shared insights about Shaw's previous criminal patterns. We should head to Maggie's for supper, Meadow suggested eventually. I need to be back by 7 to supervise the press run. The walk to the cafe took them through the busier part of town. Several people greeted Meadow, casting curious glances at her companion. She was uncomfortably aware of how quickly rumors would spread about her being seen with the handsome stranger 2 days in a row. Maggie's Cafe was a small establishment tucked between the general store and the milliner's shop. It lacked the grandeur of the hotel restaurant, but made up for it with home-style cooking and privacy. The owner, Maggie Peterson, was a cheerful widow in her 50s who had run the cafe since her husband's death a decade earlier. Meadow Gardner, Maggie exclaimed as they entered. Twice in 1 month I'm honored. Your father was in here every Thursday like clockwork, God rest his soul. Hello, Maggie, Meadow smiled. This is Owen Ironwood. He's new in town. Maggie's eyes twinkled as she assessed Owen. Handsome one, isn't he? Table by the window is free, dears. Special today is chicken pot pie. Over supper, their conversation shifted from their investigations to more personal matters. Meadow found herself telling Owen about growing up as the daughter of a newspaperman, learning to set type before she could properly write, and her mother's death from influenza when she was 12. My father raised me to believe that truth matters, she said. That a free press is essential to a functioning society, even in a small town like Prosperity. He sounds like a good man, the best, she smiled sadly. He taught me everything: how to run the press, how to write a compelling story, how to stand my ground when powerful people tried to influence our coverage. And your mother? Owen asked gently. She was a schoolteacher before she married. She taught me to love books and learning. Meadow's fingers traced the rim of her water glass. What about your family? Owen was quiet for a moment. My father was a rancher in East Texas, tough man, fair but strict. My mother was gentler, half Cherokee, though you wouldn't know it to look at me. I took after my father's side in appearance. And did you always want to be a lawman? No, that came later. His eyes grew distant. After the war, I served with the Confederacy, though I had mixed feelings about the cause. When it ended, I drifted for a while, did some ranch work. The Rangers recruited me after I helped track down a gang that had been terrorizing settlements along the border. Meadow realized that despite his relatively young age, Owen had lived through experiences she could barely imagine. How long were you with them? 5 years. Until Shaw killed my partner, his expression darkened. Jim Cassidy was a good man, had a wife and 2 young children. Shaw shot him in the back during what was supposed to be a simple arrest for fraud. I'm sorry. She reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. Is that when you left the Rangers? Owen nodded. They wanted to handle it officially, follow procedures. I wanted Shaw dead, so I turned in my badge and went after him on my own. He looked down at her hand, still resting near his. Not the most honorable decision, perhaps. Grief can lead us down unexpected paths, she said softly. I understand the need for justice. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Meadow felt as though they were the only 2 people in the room. Then Maggie appeared with coffee, breaking the spell. Dessert, dears. Made fresh apple pie this morning. They both declined, and Owen paid the bill despite Meadow's protests that it was her invitation. As they prepared to leave, the cafe door opened, and Victor Brighton entered, accompanied by a well-dressed woman. Meadow felt Owen tense beside her, his hand instinctively moving toward his holster before he caught himself. Brighton didn't notice them at first, focused on seating his companion, a striking blonde woman in an expensive burgundy traveling suit. When he turned, however, his gaze fell directly on them. Recognition flickered in his eyes as he saw Owen, followed quickly by a carefully composed smile. Miss Gardner, he called, approaching their table. What a pleasure to see you. I've been meaning to stop by the Herald to discuss an advertising campaign for my new ventures. Up close, Brighton was every inch the successful businessman, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, his salt and pepper hair stylishly cut, his manner exuding confidence and charm. Only the calculating coldness in his eyes betrayed anything sinister beneath the polished exterior. Mr. Brighton, Meadow nodded politely. This is Owen Ironwood. He's recently arrived in Prosperity. Brighton extended his hand, and Owen had no choice but to shake it. Welcome to our little town, Mr. Ironwood. What brings you here? Business opportunities, Owen replied smoothly, though Meadow could feel the tension radiating from him. I've heard Prosperity is growing. Indeed it is. Brighton's smile didn't reach his eyes. With the railroad spur coming, we're positioned for remarkable growth. Always room for new investors with vision. His female companion called to him, and Brighton excused himself. We must continue this conversation another time, perhaps at my office. I'm always looking for new business associates. As they exited the cafe, Owen's face was tight with controlled anger. That was him, Victor Shaw, the man who murdered my partner and disappeared with thousands in stolen money. He seemed to recognize you, Meadow observed worriedly. He did. Owen's expression was grim, which means our timeline just got a lot shorter. Back at the Herald office, Meadow found Tommy waiting anxiously. Miss Gardner, I was getting worried. Press is all set up for the run. Thank you, Tommy. You can go on home now. I'll handle it from here. The boy hesitated, glancing at Owen. You sure, madam? Pa said I should stick around after what happened yesterday. Meadow smiled at her assistant's concern. I'll be fine. Mr. Ironwood will be staying to help. After Tommy left, Owen watched with interest as Meadow donned a heavy canvas apron and began preparing for the press run. You do this yourself? He asked, removing his jacket and rolling up his sleeves. Show me how I can help. For the next 2 hours, they worked together printing the following day's edition of the Herald. Meadow was impressed by how quickly Owen learned the mechanical aspects of the printing press, his strong hands deftly managing tasks that usually took her twice as long alone. By the time they finished, it was past 9, and they were both ink-stained and tired. The satisfaction of seeing the completed newspapers stacked and ready for distribution, however, made the effort worthwhile. Thank you, Meadow said, wiping her hands on a rag. That normally takes me until midnight. Happy to help. Owen rolled down his sleeves. Though I think this shirt may be permanently decorated, Meadow laughed. Printer's ink is an occupational hazard. I have spare shirts that were my father's if you'd like to borrow one. I should head back to the hotel, he said, though he made no move toward the door. After today's encounter with Shaw, I need to be more vigilant. He won't have forgotten me, and he doesn't leave loose ends. Will you be safe there? Concern colored her voice. Safe enough. I don't sleep deeply these days. He stepped closer, his expression serious. It's you I'm worried about. Shaw saw us together. If he connects you to me, you'll become a target. I can take care of myself, she insisted, though the thought sent a chill through her. I know you can, but still. He reached out hesitantly and touched her cheek, leaving the faintest smudge of ink. Be careful, Meadow. The gentle touch and the concern in his voice made her heart race. I will. For a moment, they stood close together in the quiet office, the only sound the ticking of the wall clock and their own breathing. Meadow was acutely aware of his nearness, the warmth of his body, the intensity of his gaze. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell. I'll come by in the morning. We should discuss our next steps. After he left, Meadow locked the door securely and leaned against it, her emotions in turmoil. In just 2 days, Owen Ironwood had become central to her life in ways she couldn't have imagined. The danger surrounding them both only seemed to heighten every feeling, every interaction. She touched her cheek where his fingers had been, wondering what it would be like to have him touch her with more than just concern. Morning came with a flurry of activity as Meadow and Tommy distributed the new edition throughout town. By 10 o'clock, she was back at her desk, responding to correspondence when the door opened. Expecting Owen, she looked up with a smile that quickly faded when she saw who had entered. Victor Brighton stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed as before, his gold and onyx ring catching the light as he removed his hat. Miss Gardner, he said smoothly, I hope I'm not interrupting. Meadow's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. Mr. Brighton. What can I do for you? I mentioned yesterday that I wanted to discuss advertising. He approached her desk with the confident stride of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. My new emporium will be opening next month, and I'd like to engage the Herald's services for a comprehensive campaign. I see. Meadow gestured to the chair opposite her desk. Please have a seat. I'd be happy to discuss rates and placement. As Brighton settled into the chair, his eyes scanned the office with the calculated assessment of a predator. Quaint little operation you have here. Your father built this business from nothing, I understand. He did, Meadow confirmed, pulling out her rate sheet. We offer several advertising packages. Your friend, Mr. Ironwood, Brighton interrupted. Known him long, the abrupt change of subject caught her off guard. Not very. He's new in town, Brighton leaned back, studying her. Curious that, he reminds me of someone I knew in Texas, lawman, as I recall. Meadow kept her expression carefully neutral. I wouldn't know about that. No, his smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, prosperity welcomes all sorts, provided they understand how things work here. And how do things work here, Mr. Brighton? Cooperation, Miss Gardner, mutual benefit. He straightened the already perfect cuffs of his shirt. Those who assist the town's progress thrive. Those who impede it don't. The threat was barely veiled. Are you referring to my recent articles about water rights, among other things? Brighton's voice remained pleasant, but his eyes had hardened. You're an intelligent woman running a valuable community asset. It would be a shame to see the Herald suffer because its editor chose the wrong allies. Before Meadow could respond, the door opened again. Owen stood there, his expression darkening when he saw Brighton. Ironwood, Brighton said, rising smoothly. We meet again. I was just discussing advertising opportunities with Miss Gardner. Was that all? Owen's voice was deceptively calm as he moved to stand beside Meadow's desk. For now, Brighton retrieved his hat. We'll continue our discussion another time, Miss Gardner. Consider what I said about cooperation. He nodded to them both and departed, closing the door quietly behind him. What did he want? Owen demanded once Brighton was gone, to threaten me, ostensibly while discussing advertising. Meadow's hands trembled slightly. He mentioned knowing you in Texas as a lawman. Owen swore under his breath. He's making his move, establishing that he knows who I am, warning you about associating with me. He implied the Herald would suffer if I chose the wrong allies. She looked up at Owen. I'm not afraid of him, you should be. Owen paced the small office. Shaw doesn't make idle threats. If he's connecting us publicly, he's already planning something. What do we do? Owen stopped pacing, his expression resolute. We move first. I need to gather concrete evidence of his crimes here, something I can take to the federal marshal in Carson City. Local law won't touch him if he's as connected as he appears to be. And Blackwell, one snake at a time. Owen sat on the edge of her desk. Though I suspect if we pull on the Shaw thread hard enough, Blackwell will be tangled in it. They spent the morning strategizing. Meadow shared what she knew about Brighton's property acquisitions and business dealings, while Owen mapped out possible approaches to gathering evidence. He keeps an office above the bank, Meadow said. According to my sources, he often works late into the evening alone. Owen raised an eyebrow. You're not suggesting we break in. I'm a newspaper editor. I'm suggesting we investigate thoroughly. Her eyes held a mischievous gleam. If that investigation happens to occur after business hours, well, it's too dangerous, Owen protested. If you're caught, you're a former Texas Ranger pursuing a known criminal. If I'm caught, I'm a nosy newspaper editor looking for a story. She leaned forward. Together, we have a better chance of finding what we need. Owen looked like he wanted to argue further but finally nodded. Tonight then, after midnight when the town is quiet, the rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Owen checked and cleaned his revolver while Meadow finished her editorial work for the following day. As evening approached, they shared a simple meal Meadow prepared in her small kitchen above the office. You're a woman of many talents, Owen observed as he finished a second helping of her rabbit stew. Necessity, she replied with a smile. Living alone means learning to be self-sufficient. Is that what you want, self-sufficiency? The question seemed to carry more weight than its simple words suggested. Meadow considered it carefully. I value my independence, but no, that's not all I want. She met his gaze. I want to matter, to make a difference like my father did. And someday I want, she hesitated. What, a partner? Not just in the traditional sense of a husband, but someone who sees me as an equal, who respects my mind as well as. She felt a blush rising and didn't finish the thought. Owen's eyes had darkened. That's a rare man who could deserve you, Meadow Gardner. The intensity of his gaze made her heart race. Perhaps not as rare as you think. Before he could respond, the town church bell tolled 9 times, breaking the moment. We should rest before tonight, Owen said, rising from the table. I'll return at midnight. After he left, Meadow tried to sleep, but found herself too keyed up with anticipation and anxiety about their planned mission. Instead, she wrote in her journal, trying to sort through the tumultuous events of the past few days and her increasingly complicated feelings for Owen Ironwood. At exactly midnight, a soft knock at her back door announced his return. He had exchanged his usual attire for darker clothing, and his hair was tucked under a black hat. Ready? He asked quietly as she joined him, similarly dressed in a dark skirt and blouse, her hair braided and pinned up. They moved through the quiet streets like shadows, avoiding the occasional lamplight and the few townsfolk still out, mostly men, stumbling home from the saloon. The bank building stood at the corner of Main and Pine, its second-floor windows dark except for a faint glow from what Meadow knew was Brighton's office at the rear. He's there, Owen whispered, pointing to the dim light. We'll need to access the back staircase. The alley behind the bank was deserted. A narrow staircase led to the second floor where Brighton and 2 other businesses maintained offices. Owen tested the door at the top, locked, as expected. Can you pick it? Meadow whispered. In answer, Owen produced a set of slender tools from his pocket. Ranger skill, not exactly regulation, but useful. Within minutes, they were inside the darkened hallway. Brighton's office door was at the end, light seeping from beneath it. He might have gone out and left the lamp burning, Meadow suggested hopefully. Owen shook his head. Too careful for that, we need to verify if he's inside. Moving silently to the door, he knelt and peered through the keyhole. After a moment, he returned to Meadow, empty but recently, papers on the desk, glass of whiskey half full. He nodded toward the stairs. He's probably stepped out briefly. This may be our only chance. The lock on Brighton's office yielded to Owen's skills as quickly as the exterior door had. Inside, they found a well-appointed office with expensive furniture, a large safe in one corner, and a desk covered with papers and ledgers. "Look for anything connecting him to criminal activities," Owen instructed, immediately moving to examine the safe. "Financial records, correspondence, property deeds." Meadow went straight for the desk, quickly but methodically searching through the papers. Most appeared to be legitimate business documents, contracts for the new emporium, correspondence with suppliers, banking statements. "Nothing incriminating here," she murmured, opening drawers carefully. In the bottom drawer, however, she found something interesting, a leather folder containing maps of the surrounding territory with the proposed railroad route clearly marked. Properties along the route were highlighted, with names and figures noted beside each. "Owen, look at this," she whispered, spreading the map on the desk. "They're tracking property acquisitions along the railroad path. Some of these figures are well below market value." Owen joined her, examining the map. Coercion tactics, most likely, but not enough to prove criminal activity. His attention shifted to the safe. That's where the real evidence would be kept, but without the combination. Wait. Meadow's journalistic instincts were firing. "These property records show Brighton buying land from the Sullivan and Peterson families last month. But both those families told me they refused to sell." "Forged deeds," Owen suggested, returning to the safe and examining it closely. "Possibly." Meadow continued searching the desk, finding a hidden compartment in the top drawer. "Look, there's a small notebook here." The leather-bound notebook contained coded entries, dates, initials, and amounts. One page had a rough sketch of what appeared to be cattle brands. "Rustling operation," Owen said grimly, examining the page. "These are brands from the smaller ranches that have been reporting missing cattle. And these," he pointed to another set of marks, "appear to be how they're altering the brands." Meadow quickly copied several pages of the notebook into her own small journal. "This connects Brighton to cattle rustling, but we need more to link him to Blackwell and the property scheme." "And to prove he's Victor Shaw," Owen added, still examining the safe. "There must be something in here that the sound of boots on the back stairs silenced them both." Owen quickly ushered Meadow behind the large curtains at the window, then positioned himself beside the door, drawing his revolver. The office door opened, and Victor Brighton entered, followed by Samuel Blackwell. Neither man immediately noticed anything amiss as they continued a conversation already in progress. "The marshal's office in Carson City is asking questions about those deed transfers," Blackwell was saying. "Seems Sullivan went there directly instead of dealing with our sheriff." "A minor inconvenience," Brighton replied, moving to his desk. "The documents will withstand scrutiny. I've been forging papers longer than that marshal has been wearing a badge." Meadow held her breath, pressing further into the curtains. From her hiding place, she could see Owen tense, ready to move if discovered. "And what about this ranger?" Blackwell asked, pouring himself a whiskey from the decanter on a side table. "You're sure it's the same man who was after you in Texas, Ironwood?" "Yes, I'm certain." Brighton's voice hardened. "He's tenacious. Tracked me through 3 territories after I killed his partner. Then why not just kill him and be done with it, in due time?" Brighton sat at his desk, unknowingly just inches from where Meadow hid behind the curtains. "First, I want to know if he's working officially or on his own, and what he knows about our operation here. And the newspaper woman, she's been seen with him. Miss Gardner is a problem on multiple fronts, too curious for her own good, just like her father was." Brighton opened the drawer where the notebook had been hidden. He paused, frowning. "Something's not right." Meadow's heart pounded so loudly she was certain they would hear it. Brighton began searching his desk more thoroughly, his movements becoming increasingly agitated. "What is it?" Blackwell demanded. "Someone's been here." Brighton stood abruptly. "My ledger is not how I left it," and he never finished the sentence. The curtain beside Meadow billowed slightly from a draft, and Brighton's head snapped toward it. In an instant, he had drawn a derringer from his vest pocket. "Come out now," he commanded, aiming at the curtain, "or I'll shoot through it." Before Meadow could move or Brighton could fire, Owen emerged from his position by the door. "Drop it, Shaw," he ordered, his revolver trained on Brighton. Blackwell whirled, reaching for his own weapon, but froze when he saw Owen's gun already drawn. "I wouldn't," Owen warned. "Meadow, come out slowly." She emerged from behind the curtain, her face flushed but her bearing dignified despite being caught hiding. "Miss Gardner," Brighton said, his refined demeanor never slipping despite the circumstances. "Breaking and entering is a serious crime. What would your readers think?" "Probably the same thing they'll think about your forged deeds and cattle-rustling operation," she replied steadily. Brighton's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You have no proof of anything." "Don't need much proof for this," Owen said, his revolver unwavering. "Victor Shaw, you're wanted for the murder of Texas Ranger James Cassidy and multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and theft across 3 territories." "You have no jurisdiction here, Ironwood," Brighton sneered. "And 2 witnesses who'll testify you broke into my office and threatened me at gunpoint." "Drop the gun, Shaw," Owen repeated. "We're all walking out of here together and you're facing a judge in Carson City." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Brighton slowly lowered his derringer to the desk. But as Owen stepped forward, Blackwell suddenly hurled his whiskey glass at him. The momentary distraction was enough for Brighton to lunge for his weapon again. 2 shots rang out simultaneously, Owen's and Brighton's. Meadow cried out as she saw Owen stagger, a red stain spreading across his left shoulder. Brighton, however, collapsed to the floor, Owen's bullet having found its mark in his chest. Blackwell seized the opportunity to flee, thundering down the back stairs before Owen could recover. "Owen," Meadow rushed to his side, pressing her hand against his wound. "You're hit." "Not badly," he grunted, though his face had paled. "Check Shaw." Meadow knelt beside the fallen man. Brighton's or Shaw's eyes were open but glazing over, blood bubbling at his lips. "He's dying." "Meadow," Shaw gasped, his refined accent slipping as death approached. "Tell him in the safe, evidence against Blackwell, combination, 1824-36. A rattling breath escaped him. "Never trusted that cattle baron anyway." With those words, Victor Shaw died, his secrets dying with him save for the one final revelation he'd offered. Owen leaned heavily against the desk, his breathing labored but stable. "Can you open it?" Meadow moved to the safe, her hands shaking as she dialed the combination. Inside, they found stacks of papers, forged deeds, records of bribes paid to county officials, and most damning of all, a detailed accounting of the cattle-rustling operation that implicated Blackwell as the primary financier and beneficiary. "We need to get this to the federal marshal," Owen said, grimacing as he tried to move his injured shoulder. "And I need a doctor. First things first." Meadow tore a strip from her petticoat to make a temporary bandage for his shoulder. "Let's get you to Doc Weber's place." The commotion had drawn attention. As they emerged from the bank building, clutching the evidence from the safe, several townspeople had gathered in the street. Sheriff Pullman pushed through the crowd, his hand on his gun. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "I heard shots." "Victor Brighton is dead," Meadow announced clearly. "Or should I say, Victor Shaw wanted murderer and con man. He confessed before he died, Sheriff, and we have evidence that links him and Samuel Blackwell to multiple crimes." The sheriff's face reddened. "You expect me to believe. It doesn't matter what you believe," Owen interrupted, his voice strained but authoritative. "This evidence is going to the federal marshal in Carson City. If you try to stop us, you'll be charged as an accomplice." Pullman hesitated, clearly torn between his loyalty to Blackwell and the fear of federal charges. Finally, he stepped back. "Get that wound looked at, Ironwood. I'll secure the scene and take statements in the morning." Doc Weber's house was 2 streets over. The elderly physician answered their knock immediately, ushering them inside when he saw Owen's bloody shoulder. "Gunshot?" he asked, already gathering supplies. "Clean through, or is the bullet still in there, through and through?" Owen confirmed as Meadow helped him remove his shirt. "Left shoulder. Lucky man." The doctor began cleaning the wound efficiently. "Miss Gardner, perhaps you should wait outside. This isn't a sight for a lady." "I'm staying," she said firmly, taking Owen's hand. "And I'm no delicate flower, doctor. I've seen worse." Owen squeezed her hand gratefully as the doctor began stitching the wound. Despite his stoic expression, his grip tightened with each stitch, telling Meadow how much pain he was enduring. "You'll live," Doc Weber pronounced when he finished. "Keep it clean, change the bandages daily, and no strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks. We need to get to Carson City," Owen said, already trying to sit up. "The evidence can wait until morning," Meadow insisted. "You're in no condition to travel tonight." Back at the Herald office, Meadow helped Owen up to her living quarters and settled him on her sofa. The events of the night had left them both exhausted but too wired to sleep. "What happens now?" she asked, sitting beside him after brewing tea. "In the morning, we'll take the evidence to Carson City. The federal marshal there will handle Blackwell." Owen shifted, wincing at the movement. "With Shaw dead and solid evidence of the land fraud and rustling, Blackwell won't escape justice this time. And after that, will you go back to Texas?" Owen was quiet for a long moment. "I've been chasing Shaw for 3 years," he said finally. "Never thought much about what comes after." "You could stay," Meadow suggested, her voice soft. "Prosperity could use a man like you." "As what? I'm not a ranger anymore." "The town will need a new sheriff once Pullman is removed." She met his eyes. "Or, there's always the newspaper business. I could use a partner." The word hung between them, laden with meaning beyond its simple definition. "A business partner?" Owen asked, his eyes never leaving hers. "To start with," Meadow replied, her heartbeat quickening. "Though I find myself hoping for more." Owen reached for her hand, drawing her closer until their faces were inches apart. "I've known you less than a week, Meadow Gardner, yet I can't imagine my life without you in it." "Then don't try," she whispered, and closed the distance between them. His lips met hers with a gentleness that belied the strength she knew he possessed. The kiss deepened, speaking of promises and possibilities neither had dared voice until now. When they finally parted, Meadow rested her forehead against his. "Stay," she said simply, "not just for the town or the newspaper, stay for me." "For you," he agreed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "For us." The journey to Carson City the next day was grueling but necessary. The federal marshal, a no-nonsense man named Harkins, reviewed their evidence with growing interest. "This is substantial," he said finally, "enough to arrest Blackwell and any officials involved in the scheme." He looked at Owen. "You say this man Brighton was actually Victor Shaw, wanted in Texas?" "Yes, sir. I can provide verification from the ranger office in Austin if needed." "That won't be necessary. We've had our eye on Brighton for some time, though we didn't connect him to the Texas murders." Harkins gathered the papers carefully. "I'll dispatch deputies to Prosperity immediately to apprehend Blackwell. You two should return home and be ready to provide formal statements." The return journey was slower, accommodating Owen's injured state. They arrived back in Prosperity to find the town in an uproar. Blackwell had fled, but federal deputies had arrested Sheriff Pullman and 2 county officials implicated in the evidence from Shaw's safe. "He won't get far," Owen assured Meadow as they settled back into the Herald office. "The marshals will find him." 3 days later, word came that Samuel Blackwell had been apprehended trying to cross into California. The cattle empire he had built through intimidation and criminal activities was being dismantled, with water rights restored to the smaller ranchers who had been forced out. In the weeks that followed, Prosperity underwent a transformation. With Blackwell's corrupt influence removed, the town council appointed a new sheriff, not Owen, who had declined the position, but a former deputy from Carson City who had proven his integrity. The Herald published a special edition detailing the entire saga, from John Gardner's initial investigations to the final confrontation with Shaw and Blackwell's arrest. Meadow's byline on the front-page story established her firmly as a journalist of courage and principle, earning respect even from those who had previously dismissed her as merely John Gardner's daughter. As for Owen, he found his place not as a lawman but, surprisingly, as a newspaperman. His keen investigative skills and straightforward writing style complemented Meadow's more eloquent prose perfectly. Together, they expanded the Herald, adding a second printing press and hiring another assistant. On a warm evening in late summer, 4 months after their first meeting, Owen and Meadow stood on the porch of their new home, a modest but comfortable house near the edge of town, walking distance from the Herald office. "Hard to believe how much has changed," Meadow mused, leaning against the railing beside Owen. "Sometimes I still expect to see Blackwell riding down Main Street with his men." "Good riddance," Owen said, slipping his arm around her waist. His shoulder had healed well, though he occasionally felt twinges in cold weather. "This town deserves better." "As did I," she said, turning to face him. "I never expected you, Owen Ironwood, a man who would stand beside me rather than try to make me kneel." "You wouldn't have knelt anyway," he replied with a smile. "But I would have missed the chance to know the remarkable woman who runs the Prosperity Herald." Meadow reached up to touch his face, marveling at how natural it felt now. "When do you think we should tell people about the wedding plans?" "Soon." He captured her hand and kissed her palm. "Though I suspect Martha Crawford has already spread the news across town." "Probably," Meadow laughed. "She did catch you leaving my rooms at a rather suspicious hour last week." "A gentleman caller during daylight hours only, indeed," Owen quoted with a grin. Their laughter faded into comfortable silence as they watched the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The future stretched before them, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and a love that had sparked in the most unexpected circumstances. "I love you," Meadow said simply, the words still new enough to send a thrill through her when she spoke them. Owen's response was to draw her into his arms, his kiss conveying what words alone could never express, that he had found his home, his purpose, and his heart's desire in her. In the years that followed, the legend of how they met would be told and retold throughout Prosperity. How a former Texas Ranger had appeared just when a courageous newspaper editor needed him most, facing down 4 armed men with the quiet declaration that would become their personal motto: "She bows to no man." The Prosperity Herald thrived under their joint leadership, becoming known throughout Nevada territory for its unflinching commitment to truth. Owen and Meadow Ironwood's bylines appeared side by side on stories that exposed corruption, celebrated progress, and chronicled the growth of their community. Their family grew as well, first with twins, a boy and girl named John and Sarah, born 18 months after their wedding, and later with another son, James, named for Owen's fallen partner. Their home became a gathering place for friends, a refuge for those in need, and a testament to what could be built when two people faced life's challenges together as equals. And if anyone ever suggested that Meadow Gardner Ironwood should take a more traditional, submissive role as a wife and mother, they need only witness the way her husband looked at her with pride, admiration, and unwavering respect to understand why such suggestions were met with knowing smiles from those who knew their story. For in a time and place where many women were expected to bow to men's authority, Meadow and Owen had created something different, a partnership of equals, standing tall together against whatever challenges life might bring.